You'd think you know the story of Esther. A beautiful Jewish girl becomes queen, saves her people, end of story. But what if I told you that the conventional Sunday school version has stripped away the most radical elements of one of history's most brilliant political strategists? What if the real Esther wasn't just brave, but was actually orchestrating a high-stakes game of Persian court politics that would make modern diplomats look like amateurs? We're about to uncover the untold story of a woman who didn't just wait for rescue, but engineered the survival of an entire people through strategic genius that has been deliberately obscured for centuries. Are you ready to meet the real Esther? The year is 479 before the Common Era. The Persian Empire stretches from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces under a single ruler. King Xerxes, known in Hebrew as Ahasuerus, sits on a throne in the palace of Susa, commanding the largest empire the world has ever seen. His word is absolute law. His decrees cannot be reversed, not even by himself. This isn't just tradition, it's the fundamental structure of Persian governance. Once the royal seal stamps a document, it becomes as unchangeable as the movement of the stars. And here's where the story gets interesting, because in this world of absolute male power, a Jewish orphan girl named Hadassah is about to do something impossible. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let me take you back further, because you can't understand Esther's genius without understanding what she was up against. The Persian court wasn't just powerful, it was deliberately designed to be impenetrable to women. Queen Vashti, Xerxes' first wife, had just been banished for the crime of refusing to display herself at a drunken banquet. Think about that. The most powerful woman in the empire, second only to the king himself, dismissed forever because she said no once. The message was clear. Women exist for male pleasure and ego, nothing more. Now imagine being Hadassah. You're an orphan, raised by your cousin Mordecai in a foreign land. You're part of a minority population, the Jews, scattered across this vast empire with no homeland, no political power, no army to protect you. You're essentially invisible to the power structures around you, and yet somehow you're about to be thrust into the heart of the Persian court. Here's what they don't tell you in the sanitized versions. When Xerxes decided to find a new queen, he didn't send out invitations. He issued a decree that every beautiful young virgin in the empire be brought to the palace. Brought, not invited, not asked. Rounded up and taken to the royal harem in Susa, where they would spend 12 months in beauty treatments, essentially being prepared like ornaments for the king's inspection. 12 months. Think about that. An entire year of myrrh oil treatments and perfumes, isolated in the women's quarters, competing with hundreds of other young women for one night, with a king who had already proven he would discard a queen without hesitation. The odds of survival, let alone success, were astronomical. But Hadassah had something the other women didn't. She had Mordecai, who understood the system, and she had intelligence sharp enough to cut through the glittering surface of court life and see the power structures beneath. Her first strategic move, she hid her identity. Mordecai advised her to conceal the fact that she was Jewish, and she listened, not out of shame, but out of strategy. Because sometimes the most powerful move is to be underestimated. She took a Persian name, Esther, meaning star. She learned the customs, the language, the subtle signals of Persian court culture. And when her turn came to spend one night with the king, she didn't rely on beauty alone. She won the favor of Hegai, the eunuch in charge of the harem, the gatekeeper who understood exactly what the king wanted. Hegai gave her advice, and Esther was wise enough to take it. King Xerxes chose her. Out of hundreds of candidates from across the empire, he placed the royal crown on Esther's head and made her queen. But here's what you need to understand. This wasn't a fairy tale ending. This was the beginning of an impossible game of survival. For 5 years, Esther lived in the palace, playing the role of the perfect Persian queen. She attended banquets, she wore the royal garments of purple and gold, she smiled and stayed silent as women were expected to do. And all the while, she kept her secret. Jewish queen of the Persian Empire, hidden in plain sight. Then came the crisis that would define her legacy. A man named Haman rose to power as the king's highest official, and Haman had an ego that required constant feeding. He demanded that everyone bow down to him as he passed. Everyone complied, except one man, Mordecai the Jew, who would bow to no one but God. This small act of religious conviction set in motion a chain of events that would threaten the existence of every Jewish person in the empire. Haman's rage wasn't satisfied with punishing one man. He wanted genocide. He went to King Xerxes with a proposal wrapped in political logic. There's a certain people scattered throughout your empire who don't follow your laws. They're different. They're dangerous. And for a price, 10,000 talents of silver paid into the royal treasury, I'll take care of the problem for you. 10,000 talents of silver. That's roughly 375 tons of pure silver, equivalent to 2/3 of the Persian Empire's annual tax revenue. Haman was literally offering to buy the right to annihilate an entire people, and Xerxes said yes. He took off his signet ring, the ring that bore the royal seal, and gave it to Haman. He gave him the authority to write any decree he wanted in the king's name and seal it with the ring, making it irreversible Persian law. Scribes were summoned. Decrees were written in every language of the empire. On the 13th day of the 12th month, every Jewish man, woman, and child throughout the Persian Empire was to be killed, and their property seized as plunder. The decrees went out by courier to all 127 provinces, and once sealed with the king's ring, they could not be changed, not even by the king himself. This is the crucial detail that makes Esther's strategy so brilliant. She wasn't just trying to change one man's mind. She was trying to circumvent a legal system specifically designed to be unchangeable. When Mordecai learned of the decree, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes, the ancient signs of mourning and desperation. He went to the king's gate and cried out, and word reached Esther in the palace that her cousin was in distress. Now watch what happens next, because this is where the real Esther emerges. She sent clothes to Mordecai, trying to maintain appearances. He refused them. She sent a messenger to find out what was wrong. Mordecai sent back a copy of the death decree and a message that would force Esther to make an impossible choice. Go to the king and beg for the lives of your people. Esther's response reveals just how dangerous her situation was. She sent back a message explaining the reality. Anyone who approaches the king without being summoned faces automatic death, unless the king extends his golden scepter to spare them. And she hadn't been summoned to the king in 30 days. 30 days of silence from a husband with absolute power who had already banished one queen for disobedience. Think about the calculation she had to make. If she revealed her Jewish identity and approached the king unsummoned, she faced almost certain death. But if she stayed silent and safe in the palace, she and her people would die anyway when the decree was carried out. She was trapped between two different forms of annihilation. Mordecai sent back one final message, and it cut through every illusion of safety. Don't think you'll escape just because you're in the palace. If you stay silent now, deliverance will come from somewhere else, but you and your father's house will perish. And then he added the line that would echo through history. Who knows whether you've come to royal position for such a time as this? For such a time as this. Not for beauty, not for comfort, not for power, but for this specific moment when impossible courage would be required. Esther made her decision. But notice how she made it, because this is where her strategic brilliance really shines. She didn't just rush to the king in emotional desperation. She organized, she planned, she turned her vulnerability into a coordinated effort. She sent word to Mordecai, "Gather all the Jews in Susa and fast for me. Don't eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maidens will fast as well. And then, after 3 days, I'll go to the king, even though it's against the law. And if I perish, I perish. 3 days of fasting, 3 days of preparation, 3 days of building resolve and clarity." This wasn't impulsive heroism. This was calculated courage. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes, the garments of purple and gold that marked her as queen. She positioned herself in the inner court of the palace, directly in the king's line of sight. She made herself visible, but she didn't speak. She didn't demand. She simply stood there, a beautiful woman in royal garments, waiting. King Xerxes looked up and saw her standing in the court. And here's the moment that everything hinged on. Would he extend the golden scepter, or would he let the law take its course? He extended the scepter. Esther approached and touched the tip of it, the gesture that meant her life was spared. The king asked her what she wanted. He was so pleased to see her that he made an extravagant promise. "Whatever you ask will be given to you, even up to half the kingdom." Half the kingdom. The dramatic offer of a king showing favor. But Esther didn't take the bait. She didn't blurt out her request. She didn't let emotion override strategy. Instead, she made a simple invitation. "If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to a banquet I've prepared." A banquet, not a confrontation, not an accusation, just a social gathering. Xerxes was delighted. He summoned Haman immediately, and they came to Esther's banquet. During the banquet, the king asked again, "What's your petition? What do you want?" Again, he promised her up to half the kingdom, and again Esther held back. She made another simple request. "If I've found favor with you, come again tomorrow, you and Haman, to another banquet I'll prepare. Then I'll answer your question." 2 banquets, 2 opportunities to speak, and Esther chose silence both times. Why? Because she understood something crucial about power and psychology. She was building suspense, creating curiosity, positioning herself not as a desperate petitioner, but as someone with agency, someone whose requests were worth waiting for. She was also giving herself time to read the situation, to see how Haman would react, to find the perfect moment for her revelation. That night, Haman left the first banquet feeling triumphant. He'd been honored above all other officials, invited to an exclusive banquet with just the king and queen. He went home and boasted to his wife and friends about his wealth, his many sons, his promotions, and now this special honor from Queen Esther herself. He was riding high on ego and pride. But then he saw Mordecai at the king's gate, still refusing to bow, and all his joy turned to rage. His wife and friends gave him advice that revealed just how corrupt the system had become. "Build a gallows 75 feet high, ask the king in the morning for permission to hang Mordecai on it, then go enjoy the banquet." The idea delighted him. He had the gallows constructed that very night, a monument to pride reaching 75 feet into the sky. Meanwhile, that same night, the king couldn't sleep. This is where you see the hand of something beyond human strategy at work, the element of divine timing that even Esther's brilliance couldn't control. Unable to rest, Xerxes called for the royal chronicles, the detailed records of everything that happened in his reign, to be read to him. And what did they read? The account of how Mordecai had once uncovered a plot by 2 of the king's guards to assassinate him. Mordecai had reported it through Esther. The plot had been investigated and confirmed, the guards had been executed, and the king's life had been saved. All of this was written in the official records. But somehow, in the chaos of running an empire, Mordecai had never been rewarded. The king asked what honor had been given to Mordecai for this loyalty. His servants answered, "Nothing has been done for him, nothing." The man who saved the king's life had received no recognition, no reward, no acknowledgement. And now, in the middle of the night, the king's sense of justice was awakened. He asked who was in the court right then, and was told that Haman had just arrived, waiting to speak to him about hanging Mordecai. The timing was perfect. Haman entered ready to request permission to execute the man who wouldn't bow to him. But before he could speak, the king asked him a question. What should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Haman's ego immediately assumed the king was talking about him. Who else would the king want to honor but his highest official? So he proposed an elaborate public ceremony. Let royal robes be brought, robes the king himself has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, with a royal crest on its head. Let these be given to one of the king's most noble officials, who will robe the man and lead him on horseback through the city square, proclaiming before him, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." It was the fantasy of ultimate public recognition, and Haman was already imagining himself in that role. Then the king spoke. "Excellent. Now hurry, take the robes and the horse, and do exactly this for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Don't leave out a single detail of what you've suggested." The reversal was devastating. Haman, who had just built a gallows to hang Mordecai, now had to dress him in royal robes, parade him through the city on the king's own horse, and proclaim his honor to everyone. He had to become the servant to the man he wanted to destroy. The humiliation was complete and public. After this excruciating duty, Haman rushed home in mourning, his head covered in shame. His wife and advisors, the same people who had encouraged him to build the gallows, now gave him a prophetic warning. If Mordecai is Jewish, you won't prevail against him. You'll certainly fall before him. They were still talking when the king's eunuchs arrived to hurry Haman to Esther's second banquet. He had no time to process the disaster that was unfolding. No time to prepare. He was rushed into the queen's presence, still reeling from humiliation. At the second banquet, the king asked Esther for the third time, "What's your petition, Queen Esther? What's your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be given to you." And now, finally, with perfect timing, Esther spoke. She didn't ease into it. She didn't apologize. She made her request with clarity and power. "If I've found favor with you, O king, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. That's my petition. And spare my people. That's my request. Grant me my life." 4 words that changed everything, because suddenly this wasn't about some distant political problem. This was about the woman sitting across from him, the queen he had chosen and crowned, asking for her own life to be spared. She continued, "We have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, killed and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because such distress wouldn't justify disturbing the king. But we're facing extermination." Notice her strategy. She framed it personally first, my life, my people, connecting the king's emotions to her before revealing the full scope. She also acknowledged the political calculation, showing she understood that bothering the king required serious justification, and she used the word sold, subtly reminding him that money had been involved in this decree, that someone had profited from this death sentence. King Xerxes was shocked. He demanded to know who would dare do such a thing. Where is this person who would presume to do this? Esther answered with devastating simplicity, "The adversary and enemy is this vile Haman." The accusation hung in the air. Haman, who moments before had been the honored guest, was now revealed as the architect of the queen's destruction. Terror seized him. The king rose in fury and walked out to the palace garden, trying to control his rage. Haman saw his life collapsing. The most powerful man in the empire after the king, now exposed and condemned. In desperation, he threw himself on the couch where Esther was reclining, begging for his life. And that's exactly where he was when the king returned from the garden. Xerxes saw Haman on the couch with the queen and exploded. "Will he even assault the queen while I'm in the house?" The accusation of impropriety was the final nail. One of the eunuchs immediately spoke up. "There's also a gallows 75 feet high standing at Haman's house, which he made for Mordecai. who spoke good on behalf of the king. The king's response was immediate: hang him on it. So they hanged Haman on the very gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. The reversal was complete. The man who sought to destroy was destroyed by his own device. But here's where you see just how impossible Esther's situation still was. Haman was dead, but his decree remained. Remember, Persian law could not be reversed, not even by the king. The order to annihilate all Jews on the 13th day of the 12th month was still legally binding. The death sentence still stood. That same day, King Xerxes gave Esther the estate of Haman, transferring all his wealth and property to her. Mordecai was brought before the king because Esther had finally revealed their relationship, and the king gave him his signet ring, the same ring he had taken from Haman. Esther put Mordecai in charge of Haman's estate. But property and position meant nothing. If they were all going to be dead in a few months, Esther had to act again. She fell at the king's feet weeping, begging him to avert the evil plan of Haman and the scheme he had devised against the Jews. The king extended the golden scepter to her again, and Esther rose and stood before him. Listen to how she framed her request. If it pleases the king, and if I've found favor with him, and if the thing seems right before the king, and if I'm pleasing in his eyes, let an order be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman. 4 conditional clauses, each one showing deference, giving the king a way to say yes while maintaining his dignity and authority. Then she made it personal again. How can I bear to see the disaster that would come on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my kindred? She wasn't demanding. She was appealing to his emotions, to his connection with her, to his sense of justice, and she was asking him to do something technically impossible. King Xerxes responded to Esther and Mordecai with the core problem. I've given you Haman's estate and hanged him on the gallows because he plotted against the Jews. But you yourselves write an edict concerning the Jews, as seems best to you, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring. For an edict written in the king's name and sealed with the king's ring cannot be revoked. Cannot be revoked. He was acknowledging the limitation of his own power while simultaneously giving them the tools to work within it. He couldn't undo Haman's decree, but he could authorize them to write a counter-decree with the same legal authority. This is the brilliance of the solution. If you can't erase a law, you create a new law that nullifies its effect. The king's scribes were summoned on the 23rd day of the 3rd month. Mordecai dictated a new decree in the king's name, addressed to every province in its own script and every people in their own language, including the Jews. The new decree granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and defend their lives, to destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed force of any people or province that might attack them, including women and children, and to plunder their goods. The reversal was total. The same day that had been appointed for their destruction, the 13th day of the 12th month, was now the day they were legally authorized to defend themselves and strike back at their enemies. The decree went out by mounted couriers riding fast horses bred from the royal stock, the same urgent delivery system that had carried the death sentence. But this time, the message was life. In Susa, the citadel rejoiced. Mordecai went out from the king's presence in royal robes of blue and white, with a great golden crown and a garment of fine linen and purple. The city erupted in celebration. For the Jews, there was light and gladness, joy and honor. In every province and city where the king's decree arrived, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, feasting and celebration. And something remarkable happened. Many of the peoples of the land declared themselves Jews because fear of the Jews had fallen upon them. Think about that transformation. Weeks earlier, these same people had been preparing to plunder Jewish households and eliminate an entire ethnic group. Now they were claiming Jewish identity for protection. The power dynamic had completely reversed. When the 13th day of the 12th month arrived, the day when the enemies of the Jews hoped to gain power over them, the opposite occurred. the Jews gained power over those who hated them. In Susa alone, the Jews killed 500 men, including the 10 sons of Haman. Throughout the provinces, they killed 75,000 of their enemies, but they didn't lay hands on the plunder, a detail recorded 3 times in the account to emphasize their integrity. This wasn't about wealth or revenge. This was about survival. King Xerxes asked Esther what more she wanted, still offering to grant her request. She made one final strategic move. Let the Jews in Susa have another day to defend themselves according to the decree, and let the 10 sons of Haman be hanged on the gallows. The king granted both requests. On the 14th day, the Jews in Susa killed 300 more men, and Haman's sons, already dead, were publicly displayed on the gallows their father had built. The message was unmistakable. Those who plot destruction will be destroyed by their own devices. The Jews established these days as an annual festival called Purim, named after the pur, the lot that Haman had cast to determine the day of destruction. The 13th and 14th days of the 12th month became days of feasting and joy, of sending gifts of food to one another and presents to the poor. The date that was meant to be their end became their celebration, the instrument of their destruction, the random casting of lots by a man who thought he controlled fate, became the name of their deliverance. Mordecai recorded these events and sent letters to all the Jews throughout the provinces of King Xerxes, both near and far, establishing that they should celebrate Purim annually. Queen Esther and Mordecai wrote with full authority to confirm this second letter about Purim, and it was recorded in the official chronicles. Mordecai became second in rank to King Xerxes, great among the Jews and popular with the multitude of his brothers, because he sought the welfare of his people and spoke peace to all his descendants. But here's what we need to understand about Esther's true legacy, the part that centuries of interpretation have obscured. She wasn't just a beautiful woman who got lucky. She wasn't just a passive figure who happened to be in the right place at the right time. She was a master strategist who understood power, timing, psychology, and the art of working within impossible constraints. Consider what she actually accomplished. She entered a system specifically designed to keep women powerless and found the levers of influence within it. She hid her identity not out of cowardice, but out of strategic necessity, knowing that premature revelation would end her effectiveness. She built relationships with the people who controlled access to power, like Haggai the eunuch. She won the king's favor not just through beauty, but through wisdom in knowing what to ask for and when to ask for it. When the crisis came, she didn't panic. She organized a coordinated response, calling for communal fasting and preparation. She approached the king knowing she might die, but she approached with a plan, not just with desperation. She used 2 banquets to build suspense and create the perfect moment for revelation. She framed her request in personal terms first, connecting the king's emotions to her situation before revealing the political implications. When she exposed Haman, she didn't rely on moral arguments alone. She used the king's own sense of honor, his fury at being manipulated, his protective instincts toward her. And when Haman was executed but the decree remained, she went back to the king again, risking his displeasure, appealing to his sense of justice and his affection for her, until he gave her the tools to create a counter-decree. She understood that in a system where laws cannot be changed, you don't fight the law directly. You create a new law that makes the old one irrelevant. That's not just courage, that's genius. And yet, for centuries, the story of Esther has been sanitized, reduced to a tale of beauty and bravery, as if those were her only assets. Her strategic intelligence has been downplayed. Her political acumen has been ignored. Her ability to navigate complex power structures has been overlooked in favor of emphasizing her physical appearance and her willingness to risk her life. Why? Because acknowledging Esther's full agency means acknowledging that women in ancient times were capable of sophisticated political thought and action. It means recognizing that the Bible contains examples of female leadership that challenge traditional hierarchies. It means accepting that a woman with no formal power, no army, no official position beyond being the king's wife, could outmaneuver the most powerful men in the empire and save her entire people from annihilation. This is not a story about a damsel in distress waiting for a male hero. Mordecai played his role, certainly, but he couldn't do what Esther did. He couldn't access the king. He couldn't navigate the inner workings of the palace. He couldn't make the personal appeal that transformed the king's perspective. The deliverance came through Esther's agency, through her choices, through her strategic brilliance. And here's what makes this story revolutionary even today. Esther succeeded by being both feminine and formidable. She didn't have to become like a man to wield influence. She used the social expectations of her context, the banquets, the royal garments, the personal appeal to the king's affection, and turned them into instruments of political change. She worked within the system while fundamentally challenging it. She also demonstrated something crucial about leadership under pressure, the importance of preparation, timing, and reading the room. She didn't rush. She didn't let emotion override strategy. She built alliances, gathered support through the communal fast, and waited for exactly the right moment to act. When Haman was falling from favor, when the king's emotions were already stirred against him, when all the pieces were in position, that's when she struck. This is the Esther that has been hidden from us, not a passive beauty queen, but an active agent of deliverance. Not a lucky girl who happened to be in the palace, but a strategic thinker who understood how to leverage every resource available to her. Not someone who waited for God to act independently of human effort, but someone who became the instrument through which deliverance came, who heard the call of for such a time as this, and answered it with everything she had. The story of Esther is ultimately a story about the power of the underestimated. She was an orphan, a woman, a member of a minority group, triple marginalized in a patriarchal empire. By every measure of worldly power, she should have been irrelevant. But she turned her perceived weaknesses into strengths. Her outsider status allowed her to see the system more clearly than those born into it. Her gender gave her access to spaces and relationships that men couldn't navigate. Her position as queen gave her influence precisely because it was unexpected, because no one anticipated that a woman could wield power so effectively. And the legacy of Purim, celebrated by Jewish communities for over 2,000 years, ensures that Esther's story cannot be erased or forgotten. Every year, her name is spoken, her courage is remembered, her strategy is honored. The festival itself is a testimony to the reality that the weak can overcome the strong, that the condemned can be delivered, that genocidal plans can be reversed by the intelligence and bravery of those who refuse to accept destruction as inevitable. In our contemporary moment, when discussions of women's leadership and agency are still fraught with resistance, when female politicians are scrutinized differently than their male counterparts, when women who seek power are often punished for the very ambition that is celebrated in men, Esther's story remains urgently relevant. She shows us that leadership doesn't always look like traditional masculine models of command and control. Sometimes it looks like patience, strategic timing, relationship building, emotional intelligence, and the wisdom to know when to speak and when to remain silent. She also demonstrates that faith and strategy are not opposites. The call to fast for 3 days was a spiritual preparation, a recognition that some battles require more than human effort, but that spiritual preparation didn't replace strategic action. It empowered it. Esther didn't fast and then wait passively for God to solve the problem. She fasted and then put on her royal robes and walked into the king's presence. She combined dependence on divine help with the full exercise of her human agency and intelligence. This integration of faith and action, of spiritual preparation and strategic execution, is part of what makes her story so powerful. She didn't presume on God's protection while taking foolish risks. She didn't reduce faith to passivity. She prepared spiritually, planned strategically, and acted courageously, trusting that these elements work together rather than against each other. The gallows that Haman built, reaching 75 feet into the sky, became the symbol of his downfall rather than Mordecai's death. The lots he cast to determine the day of destruction became the name of a festival of deliverance. The decree he wrote to annihilate the Jews became the catalyst for a counter-decree that saved them. Every instrument of death was transformed into an instrument of life. Every weapon formed against them failed, every plot reversed upon the plotter. This is the pattern we see throughout Esther's story: reversal. The orphan becomes queen, the condemned people become the protected. The day of destruction becomes a day of celebration. The most powerful official becomes the executed criminal. The man who refused to bow is honored with royal robes. The woman with no formal authority becomes the savior of her nation. These reversals aren't accidents. They're the result of Esther's choices, her courage, her strategic brilliance. They're the fruit of her willingness to risk everything for such a time as this. They're the outcome of her refusal to let her gender, her ethnicity, or her lack of formal power define the limits of what she could accomplish. When we reduce Esther to a beauty queen who got lucky, we rob ourselves, and especially young women, of a powerful model of female agency and leadership. When we emphasize only her willingness to die and ignore her strategic genius in how she lived and acted, we miss the full scope of her accomplishment. When we sanitize the political complexity of her situation and turn it into a simple morality tale, we lose the nuanced lessons about power, timing, and influence that her story teaches. The real Esther is so much more interesting, so much more relevant, so much more powerful than the sanitized version. She's a woman who understood that changing an unchangeable system requires creativity, that influencing an absolute monarch requires psychology, that saving a condemned people requires both courage and intelligence. She's a woman who knew when to hide her identity and when to reveal it, who knew when to speak and when to stay silent, who knew when to act immediately and when to build suspense, who knew how to frame her requests in ways that made it easy for the king to say yes, who knew that sometimes the best way to expose an enemy is to honor him first, letting his pride set him up for a greater fall. She's a woman who turned a beauty contest into a platform for political action, who turned banquets into strategic opportunities, who turned her position as queen from a symbol of male power into an instrument of deliverance for her people, who proved that you don't need an army or official authority to change the course of history. You need intelligence, courage, timing, and the willingness to risk everything when the moment demands it. This is the Esther we need to reclaim. Not as a passive figure in someone else's story, but as the protagonist of her own. Not as a woman who succeeded despite being a woman, but as a woman whose particular gifts and perspective made her uniquely suited for the task before her. Not as an exception to the rule that women lack agency, but as an example of the agency that women have always possessed, even in systems designed to deny it. For such a time as this, those words echo across the centuries, calling each generation to recognize the moments when ordinary people are called to do extraordinary things. Esther heard that call in the palace of Susa 25 centuries ago. She answered it with everything she had. Her beauty, yes, but also her intelligence, her courage, her strategic genius, her willingness to risk, her faith, and her absolute refusal to accept that being an orphaned Jewish woman in a patriarchal empire meant she was powerless to shape her own destiny or save her people. The story of Esther is ultimately a story of hope. Hope that the powerless can become powerful. Hope Hope that the condemned can find deliverance. Hope that one person's courage can change the fate of multitudes. Hope that even in systems designed to crush certain people, those very people can find ways to survive, resist, and ultimately triumph. That hope is not naive or passive. It's grounded in the reality of what Esther actually did, the concrete choices she made, the specific strategies she employed, the risks she took, and the wisdom she demonstrated. It's hope born from seeing that intelligence and courage can overcome seemingly impossible odds. It's hope that inspires action rather than replacing it. When we tell Esther's story fully, without sanitizing her agency or reducing her to a one-dimensional character, we give permission for others to be complex, strategic, courageous, and effective in their own impossible situations. We show that leadership comes in many forms. We demonstrate that the path to influence is not always straightforward or obvious. We prove that those who are underestimated often have the clearest sight and the strongest resolve. Esther saved her people not by being superhuman, but by being fully human, using every gift, every opportunity, every relationship, and every moment of courage she could muster. She worked within the constraints of her time while pushing against them. She respected the system enough to understand it, but not so much that she let it define what was possible. That's the legacy that has been hidden for too long. That's the story that needs to be told. Not Esther the lucky beauty queen, but Esther the strategic genius. Not Esther the passive damsel, but Esther the active agent of deliverance. Not Esther the exception, but Esther the example of what women have always been capable of when given the opportunity, or when they seize it themselves. For such a time as this, she rose. And in rising, she showed us all what's possible when courage meets intelligence, when faith meets action, when the underestimated refuse to accept the limits others place upon them. This is the untold story of Esther. This is the legacy we must reclaim. This is the truth that centuries of interpretation have obscured, but can no longer hide. The orphan became queen. The queen became savior. The condemned became victorious. And the woman they tried to reduce to beauty alone became one of the most brilliant political strategists in human history. That's not just ancient history. That's a revolution in how we understand power, leadership, and the limitless potential of those whom the world has too long overlooked.